Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and ghouls. My name is Maddie, and welcome to Game Theory. Wait, that's copyrighted. Welcome to the rabbit hole, ladies and gentlemen. For context, I've studied a lot of horror games, and I would like to give some input to new developers and people that have very little idea of what they're doing, because the amount of shitty games we have are astounding. We have, good God, a million of them. So, let's start with talking about the different types of horror games that you can create. Although I must remind you, there is very little generification with how you can categorize horror games, so I elected to make my own. We're going to start at the top. Walking simulators. I want to talk about this first because it's the easiest to talk about. The defining characteristics of a walking simulator type game is very little interactivity, deep and rich storytelling with rich graphics. I personally disagree with this type of games, for it feels like the developer kind of want to make a movie but realized they didn't have the budget or the ability to make it. As I don't really enjoy this type of game, there isn't much to talk about. Symbolism in this game, it can be really fucking out there. I'm talking like people are on crack cocaine when it comes to symbolism. Another defining feature of walking simulators is that there's literally almost all asset flips. There's no way to die. You can pixel hunt for hours. You walk slow as fuck. It all uses Horror Engine or Unreal Engine, and it's fucking unoptimized. Sorry, I was having a moment. Games that are walking simulators can include most found footage horror games, a couple of Puppet Combos game, and a few games by Chilla's Art. And I give Chilla's Art some leeway because they're actually pretty good stories. Moving on to the next game, the puzzle games. Probably one of the biggest genres of horror type games, but it can range from full scripted puzzle games, which can walk with the walking sim like a game I've most recently played. But it can also travel into an impact affecting type of game. Some of the more popular versions of these games are like Red Haze, which is one of the really big puzzle games, Mad Father, and other RPG horror maker games. But you can also label games such as Welcome to the Game 1 and 2 in this section, but those are more in the survival horror section. Symbolism in these types of games are there, but are largely up to interpretation and have no real set in stone. My general consensus for this game is pretty neutral. It can go really bad to really good. In order to make one of these games, you have to focus a lot on making puzzles. If you want to impress me, you can make puzzles like Limbo and The Lost, which, in context, is the most fucking out there game I have ever seen. But in all seriousness, you really need to think of some pretty interesting puzzles. A main problem with these types of games is that the repetitive nature of a puzzle solving game. The Beast Inside, the puzzles were all essentially the same, except some of them got a little confusing. You also might want to introduce a new mechanic for these types of games to draw away from the standard of puzzle solving. Like, just picking up items and putting them in other places is the most boring way you could handle a puzzle solving game. But more on that at 8. The next type of genre of games is survival horror, and these are extremely big. These types of games are the biggest genre that you will probably fall into. They can include guns as well as death, and gameplay is a big feature of these. Uh, a general feature of these is that there is a difficulty curve and gun physics exist. A few examples of genres of these games are Cry of Fear, Fear and Hunger, and there's a few other ones that I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's it. Symbolism in these games tend to depend on the type of weapon your main character uses, as well as the type of enemies in this game. For example, Cry of Fear had enemies that were in the names of different types of drugs, or different type, and their abilities were either based around suicide or depression, and that tends to be a big factor in these ones. Another survival horror game, I can't remember the name of this, but it was like about a wolf, and the whole premise was that the wolf was essentially your pain and suffering coming at you, and you had to go through the game and figure out how the different enemies worked so that you could avoid your pain and suffering. Now, for the next genre of games, we have the Five Nights at Freddy's games. Five Nights at Freddy's is an American media franchise created by Scott Cawthon. It began in the 2014 video game of the same name and has since gained worldwide popularity. I'm not going to throw shade on this game, though, actually. I personally legitimately love the storyline at this point. It's gotten large enough that it is its own genre of game. I'm not a particularly big fan of Security Breach, but that's just me. These genres of games consider repetitive gameplay loop of checking cameras and surviving to 6 a.m. There are also a few noticeable outliers, such as the Joy of Creation, Pop Goes, and Case Animatronics, where the gameplay strays from the way regular Five Nights at Freddy's works. Joy of Creation Reborn had that it was a free world. Pop Goes has whole new mechanics. In case animatronics was free roam, but it still had that general theme of animatronics. These games typically tend to get a bad rep because of the sheer amount of shitty fan games. My girlfriend sent me a link to a fan game. Hold up. Anyone know what the fuck Five Nights at Animes is? Oh no. Oh no. No. Anyway, moving on to the do-it-yourself game. These types of games are the rarest to find. Defining characteristics of the do-it-yourself game is that they are something completely fucking new. Like, they haven't been done before, and that's why they're so hard to find. Of course, when they become popular, they transition their own genre, more like Five Nights at Freddy's, because that was innovative. Games like these happen to be House of Velez, Inscription, which I'm classifying as a horror game, fuck on me, the first Five Nights at Freddy's that brought up earlier, and there's a couple other. Puppet Combo games tend to end up being a staple, even though they have that same general theme of, the PSX style, but but they end up creating new mechanics. Sorry, games published by Puppet Combo. There's also Babaruka and a couple others. If you can pull this off, it'll result in a large fan base. And if you can't pull it off, then so what? You've tried to make something new. It failed. Good. Learn from your mistakes. And overall, this general grouping is just, I can't really categorize every single style of game. So I just lumped all the smaller ones into this one. Now, as you can see, there are some very broad genres and can be twisted and turned because the subgenres aren't defined and tend to overlap often and frequently. Like survival horror tends to overlap with puzzles a lot. When starting your journey into development, you should pick one of these to follow, but you shouldn't follow it exclusively, because sometimes it's okay to take something from one area and take something into the next. I will respect you if you try to blend something that doesn't normally blend. So, yeah, that's about it. Stay tuned for part 2, and if you guys enjoy this, please leave a like and subscribe, or if you don't enjoy it, leave a comment saying what you don't enjoy about it. I really would enjoy some feedback, as this will probably be the first video on my channel, and I legitimately like to talk about horror and horror theory. I will probably always be active in the comments, because you guys are pretty cool. So, yeah. See you later.